My name is Martha. I'm 69 years old, and I'm about to tell you how my daughter left me at a nursing home on Christmas Eve while she flew to New York with her new mother-in-law. I should have seen it coming when Camila handed me those wrapped gifts with that rehearsed smile. "Open these tomorrow, Mom. You'll have company here for Christmas," she said, adjusting her designer coat. Through the window, I watched her taxi disappear into the snowy night, heading to the airport. The nursing home's Christmas lights twinkled mockingly as I sat on that narrow bed, holding presents that felt like guilt wrapped in shiny paper. That's when I realized, sometimes the people we love most treat us like seasonal decorations, useful for display, then stored away when the party moves somewhere more elegant. But unlike Christmas ornaments, I wasn't going to wait quietly in storage until next year. Let me take you back to where this all began. Because understanding how I got to that nursing home on Christmas Eve requires knowing the woman I used to be, or maybe the woman I forgot I was. I was 23 when I met David at a local dance hall in 1978. He had this charming smile and wore cologne that smelled like promises. We danced to slow songs, and he whispered things about forever that made my heart skip beats. 3 months later, I was pregnant with Camila, and suddenly his forever became, "I'm not ready for this responsibility." He left on a Tuesday morning, taking his clothes and leaving behind a note that said he'd send money. The money never came, but the silence did, thick and permanent. I worked as a seamstress from home, transforming our tiny kitchen table into a workspace every evening after Camila went to bed. My fingers would dance across fabric until midnight, stitching wedding dresses for other women's happy endings, while raising a daughter whose father was just a story I learned to tell with fewer details each year. Daddy's working far away became Daddy's busy, and eventually just silence when she stopped asking. Camila was brilliant, sharp as the needles I used, with a mind that could solve problems I didn't even know existed. She breezed through high school, earned a scholarship for business administration, and graduated with honors while I sat in the back row, my hands rough from years of threading machines, clapping until they hurt. I was so proud I cried through her entire commencement speech. Her first job was at a marketing firm, downtown. I remember pressing her interview outfit the night before, making sure every seam was perfect. "You look professional, sweetheart," I told her, and she did. Confident, polished, everything I'd worked to help her become. She moved into her own apartment 6 months later, and for the first time in decades, my kitchen table stayed a kitchen table. Then came Michael, tall, ambitious, with a laugh that filled rooms and plans that sounded like movie plots. They married in a ceremony I paid, for with money I'd saved from taking in extra alterations. The dress cost more than I'd made in 3 months. But seeing Camila walk down that aisle was worth every late night I'd spent hunched over my sewing machine. The marriage lasted 4 years. When it crumbled, so did Camila. She showed up at my door on a rainy Thursday, makeup streaked down her cheeks, carrying garbage bags full of clothes. "He emptied our accounts, Mom. He took everything." I didn't hesitate. I sold my small sewing business, the one I'd built stitch by stitch over 25 years, and gave her the money to start over. "It's temporary," she kept saying, as she moved back into her childhood bedroom. "Just until I get back on my feet." I believed her, because mothers always believe their children, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. Weeks turned into months, months into years. My house became her house. My space became her space. And somehow, I became the guest in the home I'd paid for. When Camila met Roberto 2 years ago, everything changed again. He was divorced, successful, with a teenage son and an ex-wife who lived in Manhattan. Suddenly, my daughter, who'd lived in sweatpants and ate cereal for dinner, was buying designer clothes and talking about networking events. Roberto never spoke directly to me, just polite nods and conversations that happened around me, as if I were furniture that occasionally needed to be acknowledged. The worst part wasn't being ignored. It was watching Camila transform into someone who ignored me too. She'd whisper into her phone, planning dinners I wasn't invited to, weekends I wasn't included in. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give me the same distracted smile she gave telemarketers. "Busy, Mom. Always busy." Last month, she announced the New York trip with an excitement I hadn't seen since her wedding day. "Roberto's mother is taking us to the city for Christmas. We're staying at the Plaza, seeing a Broadway show, shopping on 5th Avenue. It's going to be magical." I waited for the part where she'd explain what I'd be doing for Christmas, but it never came. That's when she suggested the temporary stay at Sunset Manor, the nicest facility in town, she assured me, with activities and people my age. You'll love it, Mom. Think of it as a little vacation. A vacation from what? From being invisible in my own home. From pretending not to notice that I'd become an inconvenience in the life I'd spent decades building for her. So there I was, on Christmas Eve, unpacking a small suitcase in a room that smelled like disinfectant and artificial pine, while my daughter flew first class to create new memories with a woman who'd raised the man she loved. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd raised the woman he loved, but apparently that earned me a holiday in institutional care while the real family celebrated in Manhattan. But as I sat on that narrow bed, looking at those wrapped gifts I was supposed to open alone on Christmas morning, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was dignity finally waking up after years of hibernation. Or maybe it was just exhaustion from being grateful for scraps of attention from the person I'd given everything to create. Either way, that night at Sunset Manor was the last night I spent waiting for someone else to remember I mattered. Christmas morning arrived with the institutional cheerfulness that only nursing homes can master. Artificial garland draped over wheelchairs, staff wearing reindeer antlers, and the sound of Silent Night playing through speakers that had seen better decades. I woke up at 6 a.m., not because I wanted to, but because my roommate, Mrs. Irene, was already shuffling around, muttering about how her granddaughter would be calling from Paris any minute. She's studying abroad, Irene explained for the third time since I'd arrived, adjusting her pearl necklace with trembling fingers. Calls me every Christmas morning, no matter the time. Difference, that's love, you know, when someone makes time for you even when it's inconvenient. I nodded and smiled, but her words stung like antiseptic on an open wound. When was the last time Camila had done something inconvenient for me? When had she ever rearranged her schedule, her plans, her carefully curated life to make space for the woman who'd given up everything to make space for her? The presents Camila had left were sitting on my nightstand, like guilty secrets. I unwrapped them, slowly, partly out of curiosity, and partly because I had nothing else to do until the scheduled Christmas breakfast at 8. The first box contained generic hand lotion and body wash, the kind you grab at a pharmacy when you suddenly remember you need a gift. The second held a cardigan in a color I'd never wear, still bearing the clearance tag. The third was a book about healthy aging that felt more like an insult than a present. Thoughtful gifts, I muttered to myself, but Irene heard me. Oh, let me show you what my granddaughter sent. She pulled out a beautiful silk scarf from a Parisian boutique, the kind I'd admired in magazine ads but never imagined owning. She picked it out herself, walked through the Louvre district just to find the perfect one. Said it reminded her of my eyes. The contrast was devastating. Here was a 20-year-old girl in Paris, thinking of her grandmother's eyes while shopping for Christmas gifts. Meanwhile, my own daughter had grabbed whatever was convenient at a strip mall pharmacy between her manicure appointment and packing for New York. Breakfast was served in the main dining room, where residents wearing paper crowns pulled from Christmas crackers sat at round tables covered with red tablecloths. The staff had made an effort. There was real bacon instead of the usual turkey substitute, and someone had brought in a small Christmas tree that blinked with colored lights. But beneath the forced festivity, I could see the truth. We were all here because we'd become inconvenient to someone. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. Camila's face appeared on the screen, smiling from what looked like a hotel room with city views that probably cost more per night than I'd spent on groceries in a month. "Merry Christmas, Mom!" Her voice was bright, almost manic with forced cheer. "How's your morning going? Are you enjoying the activities?" "It's fine," I said. Because what else could I say? That I was sitting in a cafeteria full of forgotten people, while she was living it up in Manhattan. Good, good. Oh, you should see this place, Mom. The plaza is incredible. We're about to go ice skating at Rockefeller Center, then lunch at some famous restaurant Roberto's mother knows. She's amazing. She knows all these people, has connections everywhere. Tonight we're seeing The Lion King on Broadway. I listened to her list of activities, each one more expensive and exclusive than the last, while I sat in a room where the biggest excitement was bingo at 2 p.m. She was sharing her joy like it was supposed to make me happy. But all I could think about was how easily I'd been erased from her holiday plans. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I managed to say. "Roberto's mom, her name's Victoria. She's been everywhere, Mom. She's telling us all these stories about traveling through Europe in the 80s, about business deals she made, people she knows. She's so sophisticated. You'd like her, would I? Would I like the woman who'd taken my place at my daughter's Christmas table? The woman who got to share inside jokes and create new memories while I opened pharmacy gifts alone? I'm sure she's lovely, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. We're going shopping this afternoon. Fifth Avenue, you know. Victoria says she wants to help me pick out some pieces for my wardrobe. Professional things, she calls them. Says presentation is everything in Roberto's business world. Professional things. As if the clothes I'd sewn for her over the years, the careful alterations I'd made to help her look polished on a budget, had been embarrassingly amateur, as if everything I'd given her needed to be upgraded now that she had access to better resources. After she hung up, promising to call tomorrow with more updates about their magical trip, I sat staring at my phone. Within minutes, notifications started popping up from her social media accounts. Photo after photo of her perfect Christmas morning. Designer. Coffee cups, a hotel breakfast that looked like art. Roberto and Victoria laughing at some shared joke while snow fell outside their window. I scrolled through the images, each one a knife twist. Here was my daughter, glowing with happiness I hadn't seen in years, surrounded by luxury I could never provide, bonding with a woman who'd stepped into the role I'd been quietly dismissed from. The captions were full of gratitude and joy. Best Christmas morning ever. So grateful for new family. Living my best life. Not a single mention of the woman who'd given her every Christmas for the first 32 years of her life. That afternoon, I watched other residents receive visitors. Children and grandchildren arrived with homemade cookies, photo albums, stories about family gatherings happening later. Mrs. Patterson's son brought his guitar and played carols in the lobby. Mr. Rodriguez's daughter came with her whole family, including a baby who gurgled and smiled at everyone. I realized I was witnessing something I'd never experienced. Families who made space for their elderly members instead of storing them away during important celebrations. These people weren't perfect. I could see the tired lines around their eyes, hear the strain in some conversations, but they were present. They'd chosen to include rather than exclude, to make room rather than clear space. That evening, alone in my room while Irene video called with her granddaughter in Paris, I made a decision that surprised even me. I wasn't going to spend another day waiting to be remembered, another holiday being grateful for being warehoused while others lived fully. I was going to stop being the convenient mother who disappeared when her presence might complicate someone else's happiness. I was going to stop accepting crumbs and calling them love. For the first time in years, I was going to choose myself. The woman who'd spent Christmas Eve unpacking shame in a nursing home was about to become someone else entirely. Someone who understood that dignity isn't something you earn through sacrifice. It's something you claim through self-respect. Tomorrow, I would start claiming mine. I woke up on December 26th with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. While other residents shuffled to breakfast in their robes and slippers, I dressed carefully in my best blouse, the navy one with small flowers that I'd sewn myself years ago. Today wasn't a day for looking defeated. The dining room buzzed with post-Christmas conversations. Mrs. Patterson was showing off photos from her son's visit, while Mr. Chen complained about his daughter bringing store-bought cookies instead of homemade ones. But underneath their chatter, I heard something that made my stomach turn. Acceptance. They'd all settled into this reality of being managed, scheduled, and visited at other people's convenience. I refused to settle. After breakfast, I approached the front desk where Sylvia, the head nurse, was sorting through medical charts. She looked up with that professional smile healthcare workers master, warm enough to seem caring, distant enough to maintain boundaries. Mrs. Martha, how can I help you this morning? I need to use a computer, please. It's urgent. Her eyebrows raised slightly. Is everything all right? Do you need to contact your daughter? I need to contact my bank, I said firmly. There are some financial matters I need to handle immediately. 20 minutes later, I was seated at a desktop computer in the facility's small office, my hands trembling slightly as I logged into my online banking. For someone who'd learned to use the internet at 65, navigating financial websites still felt like performing surgery. But desperation is a powerful teacher. First, I removed Camila as an authorized user on all my accounts. The woman vacationing at the Plaza Hotel Didn't need access to the money I'd earned threading needles until my fingers bled. Then I canceled every credit card I'd given her over the years. The ones she used for emergencies that had become monthly conveniences. The hardest part was transferring money from our joint savings account into a new account with only my name on it. This wasn't revenge. It was survival. I was taking back control of resources I'd been guilted into sharing with someone who saw me as a financial safety net rather than a person deserving respect. Next, I searched for bus tickets. Where could a 70-year-old woman go to? Start over? Somewhere warm, I thought. Somewhere nobody expected me to be. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing. Austin, Texas. It was far enough from everything familiar to feel like freedom, big enough to disappear in, and according to the photos, beautiful enough to heal in. The ticket cost more than I'd spent on myself in months, but clicking purchase felt like the first honest transaction I'd made in years. My phone buzzed with a text from Camila. Hope you had a good second day. We're going to see the Statue of Liberty today. Roberto's mom knows someone who can get us a private tour. I stared at the message, waiting for the familiar pang of loneliness to hit. Instead, I felt something different. Relief. She was so busy collecting experiences with her new family that she hadn't even asked about mine. I didn't respond. For the first time in decades, I wasn't going to manage her emotions or make her feel better about treating me poorly. Instead, I called my old neighbor, Ellen, who'd moved to a retirement community in San Antonio 2 years ago. We'd exchanged Christmas cards but hadn't spoken in months. Martha, what a surprise. How are you, honey? Ellen, I need a favor, a big one, and I need you not to ask too many questions. There was a pause. Ellen had known me for 15 years. She understood the weight of what I was asking. What do you need? Can you pick me up tomorrow morning? I'm at Sunset Manor on Maple Street. I need a ride to the Greyhound station. Martha, I'm leaving, Ellen. I'm 70 years old, and I'm finally leaving. Another pause. Longer this time. What time should I be there? That night, I packed my small suitcase with the same care I'd once used to prepare Camilla's school clothes. 2 changes of comfortable clothing, my medications, the few pieces of jewelry I owned, and my sewing kit. The small one with scissors sharp enough to cut through anything. At 11 p.m., I wrote a note to the nursing staff. Dear Sylvia and team, thank you for your kindness during my brief stay. I am leaving of my own accord to spend time with a friend in Texas. I am not in danger, not having a mental health crisis, and not making this decision impulsively. I am simply choosing where I want to be. Please tell my daughter when she calls that I am safe, and will contact her when I'm ready. With gratitude, Martha Williams. I slipped the note under Sylvia's office door and returned to my room, where Mrs. Irene was already snoring softly. I sat by the window, looking out at the parking lot, where tomorrow morning Ellen's car would become my escape vehicle. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Camila. This time a photo of her and Roberto ice skating, both of them laughing with the kind of joy that comes from having no responsibilities beyond your own happiness. Victoria was probably taking the picture, I realized. The 3 of them making memories while I sat in institutional pajamas, watching. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I being dramatic? Wasn't this what mothers did? Sacrifice their comfort for their children's happiness? Wasn't I supposed to be grateful that she'd found love again, even if it meant I'd become inconvenient? Then I remembered something my own mother had told me just before she died. Martha, don't you dare spend your whole life being so grateful for crumbs that you forget you deserve a seat at the table. I'd failed that test with David, accepting his absence as normal. I'd failed it again with Camila, accepting her neglect as love. But at 70 years old, I finally understood what my mother meant. I deserved better than crumbs. I deserved better than convenience. I deserved better than being hidden away while someone else lived the life I'd made possible. At 6 a.m., I dressed quietly, gathered my suitcase, and walked through the halls of Sunset Manor for the last time. Some residents were already awake, beginning another day of scheduled activities and managed care. I wanted to tell them that they didn't have to accept this, that there were other ways to age besides being warehoused for other people's peace of mind. But some lessons you can only learn for yourself. Ellen was waiting in the parking lot, her car running, her face full of questions she wasn't asking. She helped me load my suitcase and gave me a hug that felt like the first genuine affection I'd received in months. "You sure about this, honey?" I looked back at Sunset Manor one last time, at the building where I'd spent 2 days learning the difference between being cared for and being stored away. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. As we drove toward the bus station, I felt something I hadn't experienced since I was 23 and pregnant, and terrified. The simultaneous fear and exhilaration of not knowing what comes next, but knowing that whatever it was, it would be mine to choose. The Greyhound bus to Austin smelled like disinfectant and other people's stories. I sat by the window, watching familiar landscapes give way to foreign ones, each mile taking me further from the woman I'd been and closer to whoever I was about to become. The elderly man across the aisle kept glancing at me with curiosity, probably wondering what a 70-year-old woman was doing, traveling alone with nothing but a small suitcase and a determined expression. 18 hours later, I stepped off that bus into Texas heat that hit me like a warm embrace. Austin's downtown terminal buzzed with energy I hadn't felt in years. College students with backpacks, musicians carrying guitar cases, people who looked like they were going somewhere important, not just somewhere convenient for others. I had no plan beyond surviving the first night. The taxi driver, a young woman with kind eyes and a slight accent, noticed my uncertainty. "First time in Austin, ma'am?" "First time anywhere, really. At least, anywhere I chose myself." She smiled in the rearview mirror. "Well, you picked a good city for starting over. People come here to become who they're supposed to be." She dropped me at a modest motel near downtown, the kind of place that asks no questions and accepts cash. The room was clean, quiet, and most importantly, mine. I sat on the bed and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd been completely alone without feeling lonely. This was different. This was peaceful. That first week, I walked everywhere. Austin revealed itself to me slowly, like a book I was learning to read. There were food trucks serving meals I'd never heard of, street musicians playing on every corner, art painted on walls like the city itself was a canvas. Most surprising of all, nobody looked at me like I was out of place. Here, a 70-year-old woman exploring alone was just another person following her own path. I found a small apartment for rent in a neighborhood called Hyde Park. Nothing fancy, but it had hardwood floors and windows that let in morning light. The landlord, a woman in her 50s named Rosa, didn't ask intrusive questions about my family or why I was starting over. She just wanted first month's rent and a promise to water the plants in the courtyard. "You seem like someone who takes care of things," she said, handing me the keys. For the first time in years, someone saw caretaking as a strength I chose to use, not an obligation I was born to fulfill. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I left. Messages from Camila that went from confused to angry to panicked. I finally read them all at once. "Mom, the nursing home said you left? Where are you? This isn't funny. Call me back. Roberto's mom says you're probably having some kind of breakdown. We're cutting our trip short. I can't believe you're doing this to me during my vacation. The bank called. What did you do to our accounts? You're scaring me. Just tell me you're alive." I typed one response. "I'm safe. I'm starting a new life. Don't come looking for me." Then I turned off my phone. Within my first month in Austin, I discovered something I'd forgotten existed. Community that asked nothing of me, except to show up as myself. I started volunteering at a local community center that offered sewing classes to refugee women. Teaching again felt like returning to a language I'd spoken fluently in my youth. My first student was Fatima, a woman from Somalia, who'd arrived with her 3 children and a desperate need to alter clothes from donation bins to fit her family. We worked together in comfortable near silence, our hands speaking the universal language of needles and thread. "You are a good teacher," she said one afternoon. "Patient. Not, how you say, looking at watch always." Her words hit me harder than she could have known. When had I become someone who was always watching the clock, always rushing to fit into other people's schedules? When had I stopped taking time to do things properly, beautifully, with the care they deserved? Through the sewing circle, I met other women starting over. Diana, a widow learning to live alone after 40 years of marriage. Carmen, a grandmother raising her teenage grandson. Lisa, a teacher who'd left her career to become an artist. They welcomed me without asking about my past, accepting that sometimes the most important thing about a person is who they're becoming, not who they've been. 3 months into my new life, I enrolled in a pottery class at the community college. My hands, so used to fabric and thread, struggled at first with clay and wheels. But there was something meditative about creating something from nothing, about watching shapeless earth become vessels that could hold beautiful things. "Don't fight the clay," instructed Michael, our teacher, a gentle man in his 40s who spoke about ceramics like other people talked about prayer. "Let it teach you what it wants to become." I thought about that while working, about how I'd spent decades fighting against my own nature, trying to shape myself into whatever others needed me to be. The clay didn't judge my age or my history. It only responded to the present pressure of my hands. My apartment began to fill with small treasures. A bowl I'd thrown that wobbled but held water perfectly, plants Rosa had helped me choose, books from the neighborhood library that I read without anyone asking what they were about. For the first time since I was young, my space reflected my choices, not compromises. I started cooking for myself. Real meals, not the quick dinners I'd made while rushing to accommodate Camilla's schedule. I'd buy fresh vegetables at the farmer's market, take time to prepare them properly, eat slowly while listening to music I'd chosen. These small acts of self-care felt revolutionary after years of treating my own needs as afterthoughts. The hardest moment came on a Tuesday evening in April. I was sitting on my small balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed impossible, when my phone rang. I'd started leaving it on again, ready to rejoin the world on my own terms. It was Camila. "Mom." Her voice was smaller than I'd heard it in years. "Please don't hang up." I almost did, but something in her tone stopped me. "I'm listening. I hired a private investigator. I know you're in Austin. I know about the apartment, about the community center. I know you're okay, but Her voice broke slightly. "I don't understand why you left. Why you won't come home. Because it was never home, Camila. It was just a place where I waited to be useful." Silence stretched between us across the miles. I never meant for you to feel that way. Intention and impact aren't the same thing, sweetheart. You meant for me to be convenient, and I was, until I decided I didn't want to be convenient anymore. What do you want from me?" The question sounded genuine, maybe for the first time in years. I looked out at the Austin skyline, at the city that had taught me I could start over at 70, that I could create a life that fit me instead of squeezing myself into spaces others had designed. "I want you to understand that mothers are people first. We have dreams, needs, desires that exist separately from your convenience. And I want you to decide if you can love the person I actually am, not just the function I used to serve." Another long pause. Can I come visit? Not to bring you back, but to see who you've become." For the first time in our conversation, I smiled. "You can visit when you're ready to meet me, not when you need something fixed." After I hung up, I sat watching the sun disappear behind buildings full of people living their own chosen lives. Austin had taught me that starting over wasn't about running away from who you were. It was about finally running toward who you'd always been, underneath all those years of being what others needed. Whether Camila would ever understand that remained to be seen. But for the first time in decades, her understanding wasn't required for my happiness. That was the most liberating feeling of all. 3 weeks after that phone call, Camila showed up unannounced. I was tending to the community garden behind my apartment building, something I'd started doing because the tomatoes reminded me of my grandmother's backyard, when I heard footsteps on the gravel path behind me. "Mom." I turned slowly, dirt still under my fingernails, wearing the wide-brimmed hat Rosa had given me to protect against the Texas sun. Camila stood there looking completely out of place in her designer business suit and high heels, like she'd stepped directly from a boardroom into my new world without bothering to change clothes or expectations. She was thinner than I remembered, her face drawn with the kind of stress that comes from trying to control things that refuse to be controlled. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup, flawless. But there were dark circles under her eyes that expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. "You look," she paused, studying me with the confusion of someone trying to solve a puzzle that had changed its shape. "You look different." I set down my watering can and really looked at my daughter. "You look exhausted." That caught her off guard. She'd probably expected anger, tears, or the desperate gratitude I used to show whenever she paid attention to me. Instead, she got observation, without judgment, something I'd learned in Austin, where people said what they saw without trying to fix everything. Can we talk? I mean, really talk? I gestured to a bench under an oak tree that had probably been growing since before either of us was born. We sat with careful space between us, like diplomats from countries that had forgotten how to trust each other. The private investigator told me you've been busy here. Volunteering, taking classes, making friends. Her voice carried a note I couldn't quite identify. Was it disapproval or something else? I've been living, Camila. For the first time in years, I've been living instead of just existing in the margins of your life. She flinched. That's not fair. I never asked you to live in the margins. No, you just made it clear that the center was reserved for other people. Roberto, his mother, your career, your social life. I got whatever was left over, and I was supposed to be grateful for the scraps. You're my mother. I thought you understood that my life is complicated, that I have to make difficult choices about time and priorities. I turned to face her fully. And I'm also a person, Camila, with feelings, dreams, and a right to be treated with basic respect. When did those two things become mutually exclusive? She was quiet for a long moment, absently smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. Roberto broke up with me. The statement hung in the air like a confession. I waited, understanding that this was why she'd really come. Not to apologize or make amends, but because her carefully constructed new life had collapsed, and she needed her old safety net. When? 2 weeks after we got back from New York. His mother, Victoria, she told him I had family baggage that would complicate their social circle. Apparently, having a mother who disappears from nursing homes and drains bank accounts isn't good for business networking. I felt a familiar tug, the old Martha wanting to comfort her daughter, to minimize my own feelings to make room for Camilla's pain. But the new Martha, the one who'd learned to throw pottery and grow tomatoes and speak up for refugee women, stayed firmly seated. I'm sorry you're hurting. Breakups are painful at any age. She looked at me with surprise. That's it? You're not going to tell me he wasn't right for me? You're not going to say I'm better off without him? Do you think you're better off without him? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. But that's not the point. What is the point then? She stood up abruptly, pacing in front of the bench like a lawyer presenting to a jury. The point is that everything fell apart after you left. Roberto started questioning my judgment, my family stability. My coworkers keep asking where you are, assuming something terrible happened. My landlord wants to know why the rent payments suddenly stopped coming from your account. There it was. The real reason for her visit, wrapped in the language of relationship troubles, but actually about money and convenience, and the restoration of services I'd been providing without acknowledgement. So you came here to convince me to come back and fix your life. I came here because I miss you. The words exploded out of her, carrying genuine emotion for the first time since she'd arrived. Because I can't figure out how to pay for everything, how to manage everything, how to be an adult without you handling all the background details I never even knew you were handling. I felt something shift. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. Here was honesty finally, even if it wasn't the kind I'd been hoping for. Camila, sit down. She did, reluctantly. I'm not coming back to be your unpaid life manager. I'm not coming back to live in a room behind your laundry area while you build relationships with people who consider me an embarrassment. I'm not coming back to pretend that being needed is the same thing as being loved. But what am I supposed to do? I can't afford the rent on that house by myself, and I don't know how to. She gestured helplessly. You're supposed to learn how to take care of yourself. You're 34 years old, Camila. You have a college degree and work experience and a functioning brain. Figure it out. That's cold, Mom. Even for you. No, sweetheart. Cold is leaving your mother in a nursing home on Christmas Eve so you can impress a boyfriend's family. Cold is canceling someone's credit. Cards by text message when they don't respond to your demands fast enough. Cold is hiring a private investigator instead of honestly examining why someone might want to escape from you. She started crying then. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen her use with Roberto, but genuine sobs that came from somewhere deep and frightened. I felt my maternal instincts stir, but I didn't move to comfort her. Some lessons required discomfort. I don't know how to do this without you, she whispered. Then, you'll learn. The same way I learned how to raise a child alone when your father left. The same way I learned how to start over in a new city at 70 years old. The same way every adult learns. By doing it badly at first, and getting better with practice. We sat in silence while she cried, and I watched a cardinal build its nest in the oak tree above us. Even birds knew how to create homes for themselves. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. I nodded. "Are you happy here? Really? Happy? Or just happy to be away from me?" It was a fair question, and it deserved an honest answer. I'm happy in a way I'd forgotten was possible. I wake up excited about my own day, instead of anxious about everyone else's. I make decisions based on what I want instead of what won't inconvenience others. I have friends who know me as Martha, not as somebody's mother or helper. I'm learning new things, creating beautiful objects, contributing to my community in ways that fulfill me. I paused, choosing my next words carefully, but I'm also sad that it took me 70 years to claim that happiness, and I'm heartbroken that my own daughter played a role in convincing me I didn't deserve it. She absorbed this, wiping her eyes with tissues from her designer purse. What if I apologized? Really apologized? Not just sorry, you're upset apologized, but sorry, I was wrong apologized. What if I promised to do better? Then I'd be proud of you for taking responsibility for your actions. But my forgiveness isn't a down payment on my return, Camila. I can forgive you and still choose to live my own life. So this is permanent? You're never coming home? This is home now. And if you want to be part of my life, really part of it, not just when you need something, then you'll have to build a relationship with the person I am now, in the place I've chosen to be. She nodded slowly, processing this information like someone learning a foreign language. I should go. I have a flight tonight, and I need to think about some things. As she stood to leave, I stood too. For a moment, we faced each other like strangers trying to decide whether to shake hands or hug. Camila, yeah? When you're ready to know me instead of needing me, you're welcome to visit again. But come as my daughter who's interested in my life, not as someone trying to recruit me back into yours. She walked away without looking back, her heels clicking against the gravel path like a countdown to some inevitable change. I watched until she disappeared around the corner, then returned to watering my tomatoes. They were growing beautifully. These plants I'd chosen and tended without anyone asking me to, just like everything else in my new life. 6 months passed before I heard from Camila again. 6 months of quiet mornings in my Austin apartment, pottery classes that had progressed from wobbly bowls to pieces I was genuinely proud of, and friendships that grew deeper without the constant background anxiety of wondering when I'd be needed somewhere else. I was teaching a sewing workshop at the community center on a Thursday afternoon when Rosa appeared in the doorway, looking uncertain. "Martha, there's someone here to see you. Says she's your daughter." Through the window, I could see Camila sitting on the bench where we'd had our last conversation, but something was different this time. She wore simple jeans and a cotton blouse. Her hair was unstyled, and she carried a worn, canvas bag instead of her usual designer purse. She looked like she'd been traveling, but more than that, she looked like she'd been thinking. I finished helping Fatima with her hem and walked outside. Camila stood when she saw me, but didn't immediately approach, as if she was waiting for permission to enter my space. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, sweetheart." We stood there for a moment, taking measure of each other. The last 6 months had changed us both. I'd gained weight, good weight, from eating regular meals and feeling peaceful. My skin had color from working in the garden. My clothes were simple but comfortable, chosen for my own preferences rather than to avoid drawing attention. Camila looked tired, but it was a different kind of exhaustion than before. Not the frantic stress of juggling too many priorities, but the deep weariness of someone who'd been doing hard emotional work. "Can we walk?" she asked. "There are some things I need to tell you." We walked toward Zilker Park, past food trucks and street musicians, through neighborhoods where people sat on porches and actually talked to each other. Austin's rhythm had become natural to me, but I could see Camila struggling to slow down to its pace. "I lost the house," she said suddenly. "I had to move into a 1-bedroom apartment across town. Turns out I couldn't afford it without your help. And I was too proud to ask for a co-signer or find roommates. I waited, understanding that this was leading somewhere bigger. I also quit my job. Well, technically, I was let go. After Roberto broke up with me, I made some bad decisions at work. Missed deadlines, snapped at colleagues, basically had a public breakdown during a client presentation. My boss said I needed to get my personal life sorted out before I could handle professional responsibilities. We found a shaded spot under a pecan tree and sat on the grass. Camila pulled her knees to her chest like she used to do as a child when she had something difficult to confess. "I've been in therapy, Mom. Real therapy. Not just the employee assistance program counseling I did after my divorce. 3 days a week for the past 4 months. This surprised me. Camila had always resisted anything that suggested she wasn't perfectly in control of her life. What made you decide to do that? Because I couldn't figure out why everyone kept leaving me. Dad, Michael, Roberto, you. I kept telling myself it was their fault, their problems, their inability to appreciate what I had to offer. But when you left, when you chose to disappear rather than fight for me, that broke something open. She picked at the grass, gathering her thoughts. My therapist helped me understand something. She said that people don't usually run away from love. They run away from being used. And I had to face the fact that I'd been using you for years without even realizing it. A cardinal landed near us, pecking at something in the grass. We both watched it, using the distraction to process what she'd said. I made a list, Camila continued, pulling a folded piece of paper from her bag, of all the ways I took advantage of you without acknowledging it. Want to hear some of them? I nodded, though part of me dreaded what was coming. I used your credit cards for things I couldn't afford, telling myself it was temporary but never setting up a real repayment plan. I made you responsible for handling all the boring adult stuff. Utilities, maintenance, dealing with service, people. While I focused on the parts of life I found interesting, I excluded you from social events because I was embarrassed that you weren't as sophisticated as my friends' parents, but I expected you to be available whenever I needed emotional support. She paused, looking at the paper with something like disgust. I treated your love like a subscription service. Always there, never requiring maintenance, and I got angry when the service was interrupted for any reason. The accuracy of her assessment was both painful and hopeful. Painful because it confirmed things I'd felt but never articulated. Hopeful because recognition was the first step toward change. But the worst part, she continued, was how I convinced myself that this was normal, that mothers were supposed to sacrifice everything for their adult children's convenience, that your job was to make my life easier, and my job was to, what? Exist? Achieve things that would make you proud? Let you live vicariously through my successes? What does your therapist say about that? She says I turned you into an emotional employee, instead of treating you like a person I loved, and that the reason you left wasn't because you stopped loving me, it was because you finally started loving yourself. We sat with that for a while. A group of college students nearby was playing frisbee, their laughter carrying on the breeze. I envied their unconscious joy, the way they could be completely present in a moment without the weight of decades of complicated history. I need to ask you something, Camila said, and I need you to be completely honest, even if it hurts my feelings. Okay, do you think I can change? Really change? Not just promise to do better change, but actually become someone who knows how to love people without using them. I studied her face, looking for signs of the old Camila, the one who asked questions but had already decided what answers she wanted to hear. But what I saw was genuine uncertainty, vulnerability, that wasn't being performed for effect. I think you can change if you want to badly enough, but I also think change is harder and slower than people expect, especially when you're trying to unlearn patterns that have been useful to you. What do you mean? Being charming and getting others to solve your problems worked for you, Camila. It got you through your divorce, helped you avoid dealing with financial reality, gave you a safety net when relationships ended. Giving up those strategies means accepting that life will be harder for a while, that you'll have to feel uncomfortable feelings and handle boring responsibilities, and sometimes be lonely without immediately finding someone to fix it. She nodded slowly. My therapist says I have to learn to tolerate discomfort instead of constantly trying to escape it. And are you willing to do that? I don't know yet, but I'm trying to find out. This honesty was new, and I found myself feeling cautiously hopeful for the first time since she'd arrived. Mom, I have something else to tell you. I've been coming to Austin every few weeks for the past 3 months, not to see you. I wasn't ready for that yet, but to see the city where you chose to live. I wanted to understand what you found here that you couldn't find at home. This surprised me. You've been here? Why didn't you contact me? Because I needed to see it through my eyes first, not through the lens of trying to convince you of anything. I walked through your neighborhood, ate at the restaurants you probably go to, sat in the parks where you might spend time. I wanted to understand who you'd become when you weren't busy being my mother. And what did you discover? That Austin fits you in a way our hometown never did, that you're not hiding here. You're blooming, that maybe the problem wasn't that you needed to come back to my world, but that I needed to learn how to exist in yours. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. I brought you something. Not because I want anything in return, but because I saw it and thought of you. The real you, not the you I needed you to be. I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small ceramic vase, handmade, with a glaze that shifted from deep blue to green like water reflecting sky. It was beautiful, imperfect, and clearly chosen with care. I bought it from an artist at the farmer's market. She said she made it thinking about new beginnings. I held the vase in my hands, feeling its weight, its rough and smooth places. It was the first gift Camila had given me in years that felt like it came from genuine attention rather than obligation. Thank you. It's beautiful, Mom. I don't want to ask you to come back to something that made you miserable, but I want to ask if there's a way for us to build something new, something where I get to know the Martha who throws pottery and grows tomatoes and has friends who respect her for who she is, not what she can do for them. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Humility. Not the performed humility of someone trying to get what they want, but the real thing. The recognition that she had much to learn, and that learning would require changing, not just promising. What would that look like? I asked. I don't know yet. Maybe visits where I don't have an agenda beyond spending time with you. Maybe learning about the life you've built here instead of trying to extract you from it. Maybe me figuring out how to be a daughter instead of a customer. The cardinal had returned, this time with a partner. They moved through the grass together, not always in sync, but clearly committed to the same territory. I'd like that, I said, but slowly, and with the understanding that I'm not going to go back to being who I was before. That person served her purpose, but she's retired now. Camila smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one. She used to smooth over difficult moments. I wouldn't want you to. That person was exhausted all the time. This person, you look happy, Mom. Actually happy. As the sun began to set over Austin, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized something profound was happening. For the first time in our adult relationship, Camila was seeing me as a separate person with my own life worth knowing, not just as an extension of her own needs. It wasn't a complete transformation that would take time, practice, and probably more difficult conversations, but it was a beginning, a real one. And after 34 years of mothering someone who couldn't see me, finally being witnessed felt like the most precious gift of all. 1 year later, I'm sitting on my balcony in Austin, watching the sun rise over a city that taught me it's never too late to become who you were always meant to be. My hands are wrapped around a coffee mug I made myself. Still slightly lopsided, but it holds heat perfectly and fits my palms like it was designed just for me. The small ceramic vase Camila brought me sits on my kitchen table, holding wildflowers I picked yesterday during my morning walk. It's become a symbol of something precious. The difference between gifts given out of obligation and gifts given from genuine seeing. Every time I look at it, I remember the moment my daughter first looked at me as Martha the person, not Martha the service provider. My apartment has evolved into something that would have been unimaginable 2 years ago, a space that reflects my choices, my aesthetics, my rhythms. The walls hold artwork from local artists whose names I know, photographs I've taken of sunsets that caught my attention, and certificates from classes I've completed simply because they interested me. My refrigerator is covered with thank you notes from the women I teach at the community center, reminders that usefulness and exploitation are entirely different things. Camila visits every 6 weeks now, not because I need her to, not because she needs something from me, but because we've discovered we actually enjoy each other's company when neither of us has an agenda. She stays in a small hotel downtown and spends her time learning about my life here, joining me for pottery class, helping in the community garden, meeting my friends without trying to manage their impressions of her. Last month, she brought her new boyfriend, James, to meet me. He's different from the others, quieter, more interested in listening than impressing, and completely comfortable with the fact that I'm not going anywhere. When he shook my hand, he said, "Camila tells me you're an artist and a teacher. I'd love to see some of your work." Not nice to meet Camila's mom, but recognition that I exist independently of my relationship to her. The transformation hasn't been perfect or linear. There have been moments when Camila slipped back into old patterns, asking me to co-sign for things, suggesting I could help solve problems that were hers to handle, getting frustrated when I declined. But now when I say no, She accepts it, sometimes grudgingly, but she accepts it. And I've learned to say no without guilt, without elaborate justifications, without apologizing for having boundaries. My therapist, yes, I have one too now, recommended by the community center, helped me understand that what I experienced wasn't just family dysfunction, but a form of elder abuse that's so normalized we don't even recognize it. The slow erosion of autonomy, the expectation that older people should be grateful for any attention, the assumption that our comfort matters less than everyone else's convenience. She taught me that claiming my space wasn't selfishness, it was survival. 3 months ago, I made a decision that would have terrified the old Martha. I bought this apartment instead of renting it, used money from the sale of the house where I'd been a guest in my own life to purchase a space where I'm the undisputed owner of every decision. The mortgage is small, manageable on my Social Security, and the income from teaching private sewing lessons. But more than the financial security, home ownership represents something profound. Permanence in a life I chose rather than one I settled for. The refugee women I work with have taught me as much as I've taught them. Fatima, who's become a close friend, often talks about the courage required to leave everything familiar and start over in a place where you don't speak the language or understand the customs. But Martha, she told me recently, you are also refugee. You escape from place where you cannot be yourself, and you come to place where you can grow. Her English may be imperfect, but her insight is flawless. I've started writing again. Not letters to people who might not respond, but stories for myself. Small narratives about the women I've known, the choices they've made, the quiet heroism of ordinary days. Rosa has encouraged me to submit some pieces to the community newsletter, and seeing my words in print has awakened something I thought was permanently dormant. There's talk of organizing a writing group for older women, and I volunteered to help coordinate it. My health has improved remarkably since moving here. The chronic headaches that plagued me for years disappeared once I stopped living in a state of constant tension. My blood pressure normalized when I eliminated the stress of walking on eggshells in my own home. I sleep deeply now, without the hypervigilance that came from never knowing when I'd be needed or criticized, or asked to make myself smaller. But perhaps the most significant change is internal. I no longer apologize for existing. I don't minimize my needs or hide my preferences, or pretend to agree when I don't. I've learned to take up appropriate space in conversations, to express opinions without immediately softening them, to say, I want and I need, without shame. These might seem like small things, but for someone who spent decades being careful not to inconvenience anyone, they represent a revolution. Last week, a young woman at the pottery studio asked me about my story. She was struggling with her own relationship with her mother, feeling guilty about setting boundaries, worried about being seen as ungrateful. I told her something I wish someone had told me 50 years ago. Love doesn't require you to disappear. If someone needs you to, be invisible for them to be comfortable. That's not love. That's convenience. And you're worth more than being convenient. I think about that Christmas Eve in the nursing home sometimes, not with bitterness, but with something approaching gratitude, because that moment of abandonment became my moment of awakening. Being discarded forced me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding. I had become complicit in my own erasure. Every time I accepted less than I deserved, every time I smiled while being diminished, every time I prioritized someone else's comfort over my own dignity, I was teaching people that this was how I wanted to be treated. The woman who left that nursing home with a small suitcase and burning indignation was brave in a way I didn't recognize at the time. She chose uncertainty over certain misery, dignity over security, selfhood over servitude. She bet on her own worth when no one else was willing to invest in it. She saved her own life by finally deciding it was worth saving. Today, I'm planning a small celebration. It's been exactly 2 years since I arrived in Austin, and I want to mark the anniversary of choosing myself. I'll invite my friends from the community center, the women from pottery class, Rosa and her family. We'll eat food I've prepared without asking anyone's permission, in a home that exists solely for my comfort, surrounded by people who know and value Martha, the complete person. Camila called yesterday to wish me a happy Austin anniversary. She's learned to recognize important dates in my new life, to celebrate my choices, rather than mourn what they cost her. I'm proud of you, Mom, she said, and for the first time those words felt true. Not proud of what I'd done for her, but proud of what I'd done for myself. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're the mother, grandmother, aunt, or friend who's been slowly disappearing to make room for everyone else's priorities, I want you to know something. It's not too late. It's never too late to choose yourself, to insist on your own worth, to build a life that honors who you are, rather than just what you can provide. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to wait for recognition. You don't have to wait for things to get so bad that leaving becomes your only option. You can start today, in small ways, by saying no to requests that drain you, by investing in activities that fulfill you, by surrounding yourself with people who see you as a complete person rather than a useful function. Your life belongs to you, not to your children, not to your spouse, not to your family's expectations or society's demands. To you. And a life lived for yourself isn't selfish, it's revolutionary. I'm 71 years old now, and I'm more myself than I've ever been. I wake up excited about my own day, make decisions based on my own values, and go to bed knowing I've honored the person I fought so hard to become. That's not the ending I expected when I was 69 and invisible, but it's the ending I chose. And choosing, I've learned, makes all the difference. If this story touched you, if you see yourself in Martha's journey, remember, you're never too old to save your own life. Your happiness doesn't require anyone else's permission. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is show others that you're worth loving by loving yourself first.